No, so I think in that, and I say that because I think the ways of thinking, the worldviews of indigenous peoples, our cultures, and the way we'll regard our relationship with our lands. This is not essentializing, but it still exists. And I can say this because I come from Busao, mountain province, where up to now we don't, even without the IPRA, we still maintain our lands. We still maintain our own traditional structures. And in fact, we refused mining companies to come into our community. So many of our traditional systems are still there, no? And I think that's one thing that we need to recognize also, that it's not as if the situation of indigenous peoples all over the country it's such in a miserable state that it's like so gloom and doom that there is really nothing more that we get so confused, and of course we get hopeless, no? But I would just like to believe that maybe the points being raised here is more on the area of legality, you know, the law, you know, which the moment you catch you capture into the law the struggles and the aspirations of indigenous peoples, there's a danger that this gets distorted and gets used in favor of the rule of those in power instead of those who are the rights holders. And then finally, my last point about neoliberalism. No, I believe that neoliberalism, actually, it's indigenous peoples now all over the world whom you can see are the most effective warriors against neoliberalism. And you can see this in Bolivia. You can see this in many parts of the world where it's the indigenous peoples who have fought against extractive industries. Now they have fought against deforestation and all these big mega projects that the state and international community wants to impose on us. And I think that's where our hope lies, because indigenous peoples who still believe that their own ili, their own local community still has to maintain its basic character in spite of course, the changes that come along with history. They are the ones who will decide in the end whether they would like to accept these changes or not. And we are very active agents of our own destinies, and that's precisely why we had to go up into the global level to fight for an international instrument called the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And I think the adoption of the UN Declaration will reinforce and strengthen the weaknesses that are there in IPRA. And I would like to say that we just finished a national meeting with indigenous peoples all over the country. We had more than 200 indigenous peoples representing their own organizations. And we all agreed that our framework for uniting between ourselves, whether we are from the right to the left, is the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And I think this is a strong, this is a very good start in terms of strengthening ourselves and our movement. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. In the long, long ago, once upon a time, far, far away, in speech one, I was asked, how come I speak English like I graduated from Brent School, and was I from the city of Baguio? Naturally, being a freshman, I said with alacrity, yes, ma'am, I'm from Baguio. Only to be told that, well, she is the product of the Thomasite teachers. And therefore, in speech one class, I was completely acceptable. But when I was asked to give a speech to inform, and the title was, I am an Igorot, my whole class asked me, even before I began the speech, pero hindi ka naman Igorota, hindi ka mukhang Igorota. And that began a lifelong attempt to try to see what really does it mean to be defined by others or by yourself. Much, much later, two young lawyers, against our almost cement-like resistance, took our hands and walked us gingerly through the intricacies, the shortcomings, but most of all the realities of law. And it is therefore in grateful acceptance of that fantastic mentoring by people young enough to be my sons. They are here on the table, three of them, that we come to the university to address you as a reactor this afternoon, simply because we would like to be very gratefully in recognition of this primary university of the people, bringing us a Centennial lecture series, the indigenous peoples, to the forefront of the discourse. To be able to live within my time, first and foremost, point one, I wish that the papers are translated. For the IPs, there are 110 languages, disseminated, circulated, and a team of speakers, or what they call the not reactors, but not the speakers here, but people who will explain to the people what exactly the three gentlemen said, because to all of the points raised and reiterated in reaction by Ms. Vicky Corpus, amen to all of that. However, we would wish in the particular instance of Dean Leonen that he further extend the bridging of the gap. It's very, very wide between the academe and the IP communities. I don't know how to do this. Maybe it has to do with extension services of the university, but this is the UP Centennial, and we hope that as Dean of the College of Law, he can somehow find his way again into the second romance with the IPs. With the paper of RR, we fondly call him RR in Baguio. We'd wish that the university put its full brain trust behind the breaking of all the glass tops that have been constructed over IPs that he has mentioned, and lend the full brain thrust of the university to help the IPs, not talk among themselves only, but more importantly, to talk to those who have defined who we are and who have placed us where we are. And of course, to GAS, what else can we say except that we wish that the entire 1,500 personnel of the National Commission of Indigenous People and the committees of the lower house and the upper house are present in the hall this afternoon. I don't think I see any one of them. But back to the beginning. It is truly timely, and I would like to consider it a watershed to accelerate that this series, this Centennial series is held to accelerate a non-biased, non-contradictory, non-confrontational, and non-unilinear discussion of the categorization of Filipino peoples, not just us as IPs only. Who defines anyway? Using what standards our definitions arrived at? Applying whose categories? Who defines precisely in the case of the IPs and the IPRA? When we were defined, we didn't know who we are anymore. Who legalizes, since this is also a forum on law, who legalizes based on factual knowledge, for example, whose experiences of those facts is it based on? A decision of one judge, for instance, that never happens in an IP community. Consensus building and community, consensual decision is arrived at. It is never the statement of one, Your Honor, in a language we don't understand. So by the time the person is sentenced, he doesn't even know what crime he committed. Also, on the basis of perhaps an aberration of peoples. We are always talking of isang bayan, isang bansa, isang diwa, isang katauhan, isang bayani, isang everything is isa. When there are so many peoples in the Philippines, and we make up a very beautiful kaleidoscope of colors rather than a very funny-looking gray thing that we don't even know how to define. Is definition for imposing the legitimacy of a majority over the rainbow of minorities, because part of the law is that the majority rules and the minority yields. Well, if that is the case, then we will never be able to get anything we wish because the majority rules and we the minority yield. Is legislation the provision of sanctions against the other? Is it that, as has been very well tackled in the three papers, is it that which allows us, as the others, to be sanctioned for something that the majority does not like? But we do need definitions. We cannot go around saying sabi ni, and there are a million sabi ni. In the case of the Philippines, there are 110 definitions of what is an IP. And in the end, we end up saying, tayo ho yung mga ipis ng mundong ito. But we need those definitions. We need the force of the law to protect us, not to disseminate or discriminate against us. We need to be protected even from ourselves. But the question we raise in the legal definition of who we are is, at what price are we paying this? Why do we have to have a mind before we have basic social services and infrastructure? Why do we have to yield entire millions of hectares of land to a forest concession in order to be able to have a teacher or even a medical profession in our communities? And we also need the protection of that law, not for our extermination alone, but for the equity of the use of the property of the commons. They have tackled the dichotomy that has been created between the land and its resources, even between the land and its people. It is as if we are, in the words of Attorney Gatmaitan, exclosure. There is exclosure. It is neither inclusion nor exclusion. It is exclosure. So there is the land, they admit that it's there, they privatize it, but we're not part of the land. The resources belong to the state. So for an IP, this is almost an impossibility to understand. Also, the parens patriae function of the church must apply most benevolently to the IPs. It is not our fault that we were left out of the mainstream of quote-unquote development. We were purposely to be the other, excluded, and now we have to pay for not having been colonized. At this centennial of the university, in this hallowed hall of the gentleman who crafted the charter of the city of Baguio, we invite all of us this afternoon, IPs included, to deepen our understanding and accelerate the surfacing of the Philippine rainbow of peoples, and to stop talking of isang bansa, isang diwa as the norm. Then perhaps, if we do that, if we honestly read through the papers at isa ulo at isa puso, baka magkakaintindihan tayo kung bakit nagkaroon tayo ng Bangsamoro juridical entity. That is just another way of expressing what these papers have been saying this whole afternoon. In the end, I would like to believe, even as an indigenous person, that we are all trying to build one nation, sharing the same rich, if very limited, natural resources, and seeking a just and equitable democracy. For all Filipinos, every one of you here who is in the hall is an indigene. So when we refer to our senators, we call him the senator from. I don't think Senator Revilla will ever want to be referred to as the senator from Iloilo, nor Senator Miriam Santiago to be acknowledged as the senator of the Ilocos. I think this is going to create internal war in the Senate, warring as it is already. So with the representatives, so with our chancellor, so with the president of the UP system, they are almost always introduced as the lady from, the gentleman from. We all have roots and we are indigenous. The trouble is, it is only the law, the legality and the academic definition that has defined Vicky and I and the rest of you here who are indigenous peoples as ipus. That means cockroach in the Ilocano language, no? And the rest of you as Filipinos. Thank you very much.